Here we are, the day after the MLB trade deadline. It is August 2nd. We're about, 16 hours removed? And I think the embers are finally starting to clear out because there has been a lot of burning going on. Not physically, but the resentment is white hot, I think you would say, Kevin Gorman. Would that be correct?
No question. I've seen it described as the biggest day of disillusionment for Pirates fans since the Aramis Ramirez trade, which I think is...
That's a bit of a stretch,
I think that's going a bit overboard.
I would agree.
I bring a completely different perspective to this, and I understand Pirates fans where they're coming from. I understand the disappointment and maybe the disgust, but I look at this as kind of spare me the outrage. This is a team that was on the outside, and even though it was on the outside looking in the playoff race, even though the Pirates were, 2 to 3 games? I think it was 3 games going into the trade deadline, 2 coming out.
Right.
2 coming out of last night's games.
Right.
Away from a wild card berth. I mean, we're talking a wild. There was no guarantee they were in the playoffs. They were in the wild card race.
And they were 2 out of the wild card race going into that weekend series in Milwaukee where they got swept.
And that may have had a lot to do with what happened yesterday.
I would imagine
that the management didn't see this as a playoff team. I can understand when you trade an all-star closer who's been among the best in the game, and it's viewed as a pure salary dump. But the Pirates did get in return a major league reliever, which addressed a major need in the bullpen, and they got a guy who touches 100 miles an hour. He's a left-hander. I think he's a left-hander.
Another left-hander.
Another left-hander who they were high on as a prospect.
Right.
It's a lot to give up for that return, but they did get somebody to bolster the bullpen, and they did get a guy that they had thought highly of, at least that they thought highly of. I think the deal that everybody is focused on right now is Francisco Liriano, but the deal that really stinks is that they traded Neil Walker to the Mets for John Neese, and then traded John Neese back to the Mets for Antonio Bastardo. So essentially your return on Neil Walker is Antonio Bastardo, a guy you had on your team last year.
Who also left with Neil Walker last season. I think, and here's where I am with this, and I have shuffled this around in my brain for at least the last 12 hours. And I really came around to the same conclusion that Rob Rossi did, which is actually, I believe, on the front of this morning's Trib. And the really tenor of Rob Rossi's column was that the Pirates are now acknowledging the fact that they made a few mistakes with these trades.
No doubt.
They're acknowledging that trade for John Neese was a mistake. They're acknowledging that, they are pretty much...
The Liriano contract was a mistake.
That they're acknowledging that the Liriano contract is a mistake, and they're moving on from that also.
And that was the highest paid Pirate, per year salary at least, the highest paid Pirate in franchise history. It
was also the richest free agent contract in franchise history when they signed him. So,
although they signed him as one of their own free agents.
As one of their own free agents. Now, when you look at those things, and this is where I draw the line here, because it's not necessarily the fact that they made the moves that they made. It's not necessarily the fact of how they did it. For me, there was an opportunity for them maybe 2 weeks ago, maybe even a week ago, to decide one way or another and say, okay, you know what? We're going to go after this because we need this. We're going to sell this because we need to do this in order to get this. They never really made that distinction. They never really said, we're going to buy, we're going to sell. And I believe this was something that we discussed on the number one Cochran Sports Show on Sunday night. The suggestion was handed out that the Pirates are trying to have it both ways. They were trying to act as though they were a buyer, but still sell off pieces as though they were a seller. Without I think they do understand the fact that there's consequences to it. But I think they took the risk on the fact that they knew they would sell some parts and maybe get some parts back, and those things didn't happen. So by trying to have it both ways, you're really chasing 2 rabbits, and you caught neither one.
Well, here's my take on this, and this is what I want to make very, very clear. The guy that I'm not going to let off the hook is Bob Nutting, the principal owner of the Pirates.
I don't think anybody's letting Bob Nutting off the hook.
I've been calling him Bottom Line Bob Nutting for years. It's a nickname that did not catch on, but it's one that,
it might after this morning.
Remember the feel the Bob Nutting love when they made the wild card, and hey, look at us, baseball. We're back, and baseball matters in Pittsburgh again. Everybody was fawning over Bob Nutting for doing this because he had a strategy and he had a plan to kind of resuscitate the Pirates after 4 or 5 year plans that extended into a 20-year losing streak. In no way am I letting Bob Nutting off the hook, because had he spent the money in the offseason and addressed the Pirates' needs, instead of fielding a team full of super utility players, instead of doing stopgap measures to ensure that the Pirates didn't spend a lot of money on players who weren't going to be the long-term answers. It was a waiting game. They called this the bridge year. But I feel like if it's not Bob Nutting blew it in the offseason, but you know who blew it during this season? The two highest paid players on the Pirates, Francisco Liriano and Andrew McCutchen.
Couldn't agree with that more.
We can talk all day about that.
And we will do that because we will have plenty of trade talk. We'll have the Pirates Roundtable coming up. We have Bob Cohen joining us in the studio for the Pirates Report. Andrew Erickson will join us for Pirates Pregame, all right here on Trib Live Radio.